You are listening to the Digital Shelf Insider podcast of Metriscard, where we tackle the newest trends, strategies, and pain points shaping growth across the digital shelf. Join our host and e-commerce leaders across multiple industries for in-depth discussions on how to maximize your brand in the digital arena. So today we have Amanda Wolff with us, and Amanda is an e-commerce geek with over 25 years of experience. Amanda is the Chief Revenue Officer at Jenda. We'll get to know more about it from her. And she's also a board member at First Mover. And First Mover needs no introduction. I've been to their webinars. I know a lot of brands have been there. And it is that super educator place for CPG brands. So, what makes her work and stories stand out and more inspiring for all of us is how she connects the dots between data, storytelling, and create an impact in this community. Amanda, welcome to the podcast. Could you give us a brief intro into your career, on yourself, about gender, and all the cool stuff that you're doing here?
Sure. Thanks so much for having me as well. I really appreciate it. Okay. So where do I start? I started my career in the late 90s when the internet was really disrupting every business. I'm dating myself, of course, but after a few different jobs, I landed at a publisher just as Amazon was really disrupting the book business. And so watching that channel shift from that company selling largely in campus bookstores to Amazon being our biggest customer over the course of my 17 years there really did change my trajectory. After a few stints in different roles, I started in creative. So I was actually a writer and worked in production art. And then I moved into sales and then into marketing. I eventually was a business owner in a pretty transformative D2C e-commerce business for them that was based on digital access to course materials. And then I wound up leading most of the marketing team there. So then from there, I was ready for a change, and I took a call from a recruiter to join a startup in the CPG retail e-com space. They focused on content optimization. That company was One Space. And they primarily served FMCG, so that faster moving consumer goods space in online grocery. So that was in 2018. They were making a pivot into that grocery space, and online grocery really wasn't a thing pre-pandemic. So I took the leap, left my really big office and my big team for this kooky startup environment. I had a race car next to my desk, and I was in this shared workspace working with all these Gen Zs. I'd gone from being one of the youngest people in the company to being one of the oldest people in the company. And then the pandemic struck. And that was really tough, of course, on everyone. It was really difficult for everybody, but we pivoted quickly and we were able to transform the business pretty significantly to a remote workforce and really take advantage of the growth that was happening in online grocery. And along with my fellow executive team, we led the business to an acquisition. I stayed with that acquirer, Essential, for a few years. Ultimately, they transitioned that company to Flywheel and helped it assimilate many of the other startups that it had acquired, and ultimately sold that Flywheel business off to Omnicom in December of 2023. I left that organization at that time and started doing consulting and advisory with First Mover. And then a few months later, I joined Jenda as the CRO.
Awesome. That's like a very inspiring career journey. It's very your early years are very similar to kind of the journey that I have. I joined in as a writer, and then I'm in this e-commerce space since just 2-3 years right now, and it's quite similar. Um, uh, could you tell us a little bit more about your work at Gender? And I guess sort of this, just specializing in beverages and alcohol. It's one of its kind. To my knowledge, I'm not aware of any other tech provider doing the same.
Yeah, Jenda's very unique. So I had a lot of beverage alcohol clients when I worked at One Space and at Flywheel. And I'm passionate about that industry, but I thought I knew a lot. And it turns out I'm drinking from the fire hose. That category really warrants a lot of specialization. And I would say Jenda isn't an e-commerce company per se, but we leverage e-commerce data as a proxy for in-store POS systems. So we're really a commercial data platform for beverage alcohol, specifically suppliers and wholesalers in that space, to help provide them with better visibility into availability and pricing of their products on the physical retail shelves. At more than 60,000 storefronts in the US. We also have a marketing product that looks at, think of it sort of like social media monitoring, but also websites and email monitoring of retailer digital marketing efforts. And we're looking at our data daily and at the outlet level, so teams can really act fast when products go out of stock or when they see opportunities to win new competitive shelf positions or promotional opportunities at those retailers. So in the beverage alcohol space, there's the three-tiered system where suppliers and distributors work with retailers. So they have that distributor as an intermediary between the suppliers, the manufacturers, and the retailers. And so our data really kind of helps connect the dots between the suppliers, the distributors, and that retailer portion of that three-tier system. Another example of that timeliness of our dynamic data is around pricing. And an example right now is the proposed tariffs that are coming from the incoming administration on imported goods, including wine and spirits, impacts products like tequila and champagne. So suppliers and distributors really need to be nimble and have an accurate understanding of what the entire market is going to be pricing their products at. So that includes independent stores where the suppliers and the distributors may not necessarily know what all the retailers are going to be pricing their products at. They often have blind spots at that. So our products can help them at a daily level, at that outlet level, understand what's really going on very, very quickly so that they can respond to their pricing strategies in a dynamic way.
Interesting. Since we are on the subject of beverage alcohol, so there's this
Yeah.
one particular brand that's disrupting the market, and I'm talking about Liquid Death here. Their marketing tactics are wild, and I read a report early on in the day that even the Gen Z has this, effect of, they're very mindful drinkers and they prioritize taste over effect. So, what are your thoughts on this particular brand disrupting the market share? And is it like eating up some of those, not even the alcohol category as well?
Liquid death is really interesting, and non-alcoholic products in beverage alcohol, even though it's, we're talking about beverage alcohol right now with Jenda, non-alcoholic products are obviously growing in the beverage alcohol space. And Liquid Death is a really interesting product, both from the non-alc space, but also from the alcohol space in terms of the share. They've done a really good job disrupting the water and tea markets with their subversive branding strategy. It's really metal. It's really punk, pretty rad. And beyond that, I went to Amazon today, and I could see that they're not really throwing a lot of money comparatively at retail media compared to a lot of the non-alc players in the form of like Unilever's Liquid IV or Nestle's Perrier and Essentia. Both of them are bidding with conquesting ads on the Liquid Death brand terms, for example. But instead, it's interesting because Liquid Death is really investing instead on, some of those off-platform branding opportunities, really leaning into that kind of more heavy branding, heavy metal branding opportunity. And so not knowing for sure if that lack of retail media was based on the fact that their target audience, metalheads, are still sleeping at 10 a.m. Central Time on a Wednesday morning, or if they're just really confident, in their brand strategy, knowing that, the top organic position is going to convert. based on their brand term anyway. But I think it's just really interesting watching what they're doing from a branding standpoint and seeing how they're disrupting multiple categories, both non-alc and bev-alc, with their approach to their branding.
Right. So we can even say it's a unique case that their strategies couldn't even cannot entirely work in another brand's case, right?
Yeah, exactly. They've really honed in on a niche market there.
Yeah. Uh, so in the bev alcohol space, a lot of product discovery happens in stores. So at First Mover, you created these frameworks for digital shelf excellence, and you might have come across certain common mistakes what brands make when it comes to this category on the digital shelf. Uh, how can they correct it, and what are these common mistakes that you've seen?
Sure. And I would say these are category agnostic, right? I mean, there are a lot of things that I see commonly happen in the digital shelf that, yeah, in CPG as a whole, not even necessarily bev-alc. One of the things, for example, are hero images. So not thinking about the retailer user interfaces when you're designing your hero image. One thing that we see changing a lot on Walmart is iconography that's happening with hero images and actually all their images, where little hearts
Yeah.
and plus signs or add to cart buttons or different little icons that you can favorite are covering your images on those retailers. And so if you are including important details on your hero image, they're getting blocked by the retailers on different user interfaces. And so thinking about what the retailers are doing is a really, really important detail as you're thinking about your hero image design in particular, because it's important, especially in CPG, to remember, especially in grocery, in bev-alc, that those products might get added to cart before they ever even get to your PDP. So you really have to be thinking about that hero image as the most important thing that you're going to say about your product before they ever even get to the PDP itself. So that would be probably one of the first things that I would say is really think about the retailer's user interface and don't be afraid to customize that image just a little bit for every retailer, depending on how their user interface is customized. The other is titles. Really thinking about how to optimize for the algorithm as much as you're thinking about conversion. That and your hero image really need to work for both conversion and for the algorithm. Thinking about making sure that all the keywords that you can possibly fit into that title based on your character restrictions are there. But those character restrictions are really important. On Walmart, if you go over 70 characters, you're going to be penalized in your content score. And in your content score, that does directly impact your algorithmic ranking on Walmart. So those two things are really important to factor in. For your images and your image carousel, especially when you think beyond your first image, I always like to think of your second image as a unique selling proposition. If you only have one other image to tell your whole story about your product, what is that image going to be? Is it really just going to be another angled pack shot? Because a lot of brands are really just doing that. They're not really saying much about their image. Or maybe they're just telling a feature of their product, but they're not really giving a benefit. And so I like to think of that image, that second position image, as what is the one thing that you want to say about your product? Because your hero image is probably not going to say all of that. So that's your chance to tell your whole story. And very few products are really using that. So I like to think about your images as telling that story in an image order. So use your images, almost think of it like a PowerPoint presentation. Tell it in a consecutive story in an order. And then lastly, use your enhanced content and your videos as a chance to further tell your product story for people who maybe didn't know enough about it to begin with to add the product to cart. But don't use them as a branding exercise because people are not going to convert if they're clicking into those additional features, to learn more about enhanced content or to learn more about your product from video. They're really going to skim past that information and not really dig into it. unless they want to know more about that product. And so if you're really just telling a branding story, then you're wasting that opportunity to add that product to cart. Those people that are really spending time with video enhanced content want to know more about that product. And the only reason they're looking at it is because they didn't get enough information from your main image carousels and your product descriptions to begin with. So give them that information. Give them what they want to know about the product. Don't tell them a fluffy brand story. You can still tell that brand story, but tell that on your brand store or in other places. But use that piece of information to tell that broader story.
Right. Do you think that's a more prevalent case with legacy brands versus challenger brands? Like challenger brands are doing it better. Do you see that more often?
I think that challenger brands have it a little bit easier
Yeah.
because they don't have as many products to focus on. When you have 1,500 products, it becomes very, very hard to do this at scale and to do it well. Now, that said, I still think that I see this problem a lot, even with challenger brands, where they just don't necessarily know what to focus on. Um, and so I would just, if they think of their PDP as a breadcrumb trail, where they just use each piece of information to give just a little bit more information about the product, then I think that they can ultimately help win that conversion, which is really what that information is about.
Right. Um, Okay, so let me tell you a bit about what we do at PetriScott. We focus on digital shelf monitoring, and there's all the metrics that we cover, like share of search, content compliance, uh, availability and assortments, and ratings and reviews, and mapped vastly. So when it comes to rating and review, it's just not monitoring that we help with. We also help with the analysis part. That is to say, like we help to break down those reviews into themes and sub themes so that brands can closely understand and listen to what their customers are asking for from their products, how the products can be improvised, and how their campaigns can be devised better. So, how do you see rating and review as a digital shelf metric, as a leading indicator that brand manufacturers must leverage?
Ratings and reviews are really a critical component of the digital shelf. I mean, they're absolutely factored into the algorithmic ranking. So, that, of course, is a critical component on Amazon, on Walmart. We know that they're factored into the content score on Walmart, so they go into the rankings there. They're a huge component of Amazon. We know that they are also now being mined for Amazon Cosmo. So they're also being factored into that component. So, we know that they're factored in there. They're also being factored into conversions in the sense that they drive, consumer sentiment. They drive the way that consumers are thinking about how they impact their conversions and how they think about and trust your products and trust the content that's being consumed. The more reviews you have, the more trustworthy and positive reviews you have, the more consumers are going to trust the content that you ultimately are trying to sell and the product that you're trying to sell. So they absolutely factor into that. You can also feed those reviews themselves by answering some of that unanswered question, some of those unanswered questions in your content. So if there are themes that come out of those reviews from MetricScart, for example, that you surface to the brands that you work with, those are things that the brands should be bringing back into their content, in their images or in their copy, to be able to to make it clearer that so that that cycle can then ultimately resolve itself, so that the reviews are better, and that the questions ultimately don't surface back into the reviews later.
Right. I guess it's all about connecting the dots, right? So the conversion happens. Yeah. And
Exactly.
we just like, 2 weeks, hardly 2 weeks away to 2025. How do you see the future of digital shelf management and shopping behavior shaping for 2025?
I mean, definitely AI search and personalization and content. We saw that manifesting on Amazon, especially this year, with many, many, many changes happening on Amazon. I think there were some subtle changes early in the year, things like additional fields that populated first. We had additional hidden keywords that, um, they doubled the number of hidden keywords that were allowable. Was it doubled? It might have even been 10 times, actually, now that I think about it. I think I misspoke there. A lot more bullets became allowable. So a lot more character content became, allowable in Amazon. And then the dynamic titles, that announcement that happened at Amazon Accelerate, Rufus with that AI chat capability, or not chat, but the AI agent that you can, the personalization and conversational search agent with Rufus, and now, of course, with Cosmo. And I think that piece is pretty dramatic because Cosmo actually crawls images and makes associations with context and actually looks and analyzes usage occasions and helps understand from a PDP how is a product actually being used, what seasonal occasions are happening, not just with copy and with phrases and keywords, but what's the context of how this product is used, and that application is still being really kind of being dabbled with when it comes to the main search, but now it's being fed into Rufus, um, fully. And so I think as we see that roll out into the main kind of the holistic search on Amazon, we're going to start seeing some pretty dramatic changes and disruption in how products are going to start ranking in search. And I think we'll start seeing some pretty big changes in some of the bigger players that currently rank. I think there's some really great LinkedIn conversations happening right now. Andrea Cayley had a really, really great article a couple weeks ago. So highly recommend that you start following some of the luminaries on LinkedIn that are talking about Cosmo and that. But I think it's just the beginning. So I think that's where we're really going to see some disruption in 2025.
Definitely. And as someone who's heavily involved in omni-channel strategies, what advice would you give brands for the coming year?
I mean, look, consumers are weaving seamlessly between the two worlds. We already know that consumers who are doing online pickup, who are getting their products delivered to them through Instacart, it's a seamless experience. At Jenda, that's really the world that we live in BevAlc, right? I mean, we already know that BevAlc is, we're leaning on e-commerce as a proxy for what's happening in store for that exact reason. So, I think that it's really important for people who are working in the digital space to understand that anything that you're doing in the digital space has to really reflect what the consumer is going to get in the physical world. If you're changing your pack shot, make sure that you're not changing it so much that it's not going to really reflect and resemble the physical product when they get it. That's going to risk getting bad reviews and creating customer confusion in the end. You really do need to strike that balance. And I talk a lot about, learning from user experience colleagues. Customer journey maps are a really great tool that user experience colleagues use. And customer journey maps don't just look at the physical or the online world. They can really blend the two. And so, kind of following that model is a really great example and a really great way, I think, to start understanding how the true omni-channel journey can work. So, I use this example sometimes where I was in a Walmart store. I was shopping for groceries. I got a message from my partner, and he was trying to buy Crown staples. He's doing a project at home, and he was asking, he was looking online, and he said, "Can you buy these staples? They're a specialty staple. You can get them in aisle 27 or something like that." Well, they weren't in aisle 27. They were in aisle 27 on the app that he was looking at. They were not in aisle 27 when I got to the physical store. I looked on the app and they were in a different aisle.
Mm-hmm.
Then I went into that aisle. They weren't in that aisle. Then I talked to a store manager. They were in a different aisle. They weren't actually there. So it was a lot of confusion, right? And in the end, I wound up leaving the store and buying a totally different brand from a totally different retailer. And a lot of that was because e-commerce advertising was surfacing products that weren't even Crown staples. And so there's so much blending in with digital and with the physical that I think it's really incumbent on e-commerce practitioners to work with their retailers and make sure that they're looking at the entire customer journey to understand where there are breaks in that journey and try to deliver a better experience for everybody.
Right. It could be even vice versa, right? Like the kind of shopper marketing technique, tactics that's used in physical stores might not reflect well in the e-commerce side, and then there could be a confusion there as well, right, for a brand.
Exactly right. Exactly right. That's right.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time, Amanda. It was a very value-packed, inspiring conversation that we just had. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed my time with you.
Now that's the end of our episode. If you love what you just listened to, you should check us out on LinkedIn. We have our newsletter series there. We also have our newsletter series via email with super exclusive e-commerce insights. This podcast is also on Spotify and Apple. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe here on YouTube. Wherever you're listening from, you have a great day, and we'll be right back with an awesome guest next week.